afraid people would think I wasn't serious or that I just did it for attention. What most people don't know is that I had been carrying those pills with me for a long time, waiting for the right moment. On the night I finally did it, my little brother was asleep in the bunk bed above me. As I lay there waiting, the thought of him finding me the next morning is what ultimately saved me. That moment of clarity, the love I had for him, pushed me to get up and ask for help. It was the darkest time of my life, but I'm here now because I couldn't bear to hurt him. That thought stays with me to this day. Story 23. There was this girl I was friends with years ago, someone I cared about so deeply that I could say I loved her. I never told her, though, not until I finally had the chance and chose to cast it aside. We were great friends, and I loved her so much that I became whatever she needed me to be. Her confidant, her protector, her advisor, her chauffeur, and the guy who stayed sober so everyone could get home safely. I knew everything about her dreams, her fears, her wishes. I wiped her tears, made her laugh, and stood by her side no matter what. Around her, I felt like the best version of myself. A loyal knight, unshakable, always smiling, and ready to bring her joy. But she didn't know me beyond that. She never saw past the armor. My mind is a nightmare, shaped by a tough upbringing, riddled with anxiety, panic attacks, and a deep lack of self-respect. I struggled to sleep, felt like a zombie, and at my lowest points thought I might die at any moment. Yet I always stood by her, hiding everything I was going through. One night we were lying on the ground drinking, and she told me she loved me. It was the best feeling I've ever had, even to this day. But I couldn't accept her love. My life was a mess. Family issues, financial struggles, mental health problems, an uncertain future. I couldn't bring myself to share that burden with her. I couldn't let her see the broken person beneath the armor. So, I let her down gently, and it crushed me. I still think about that decision and wonder if it was the right one. Did I protect her from my chaos, or did I miss out on something beautiful? I'll never know. It's my little secret, now ours. Story 24. Forgive the format, I'm on mobile. I've been battling depression for about 10 years, maybe even longer. My life has been extraordinarily shy, but I've worked hard to make it better. I went from having no education to earning a degree and landing a job that pays $67,000 a year, all within 3 years. I married someone I truly loved, and he's been a good dad to my son. But then things fell apart. For 3 years, my husband ignored all my physical and emotional needs, even after I tried talking to him about it. Eventually, he cheated on me, and that was the breaking point. I snapped and told him I wanted a divorce. I moved out, got some of my life together, and tried to move on. My son stayed with my ex because he's in the final years of school, doing well academically for once, and I didn't want to disrupt that. I tell people it's better to be alone than to feel alone in a relationship, but honestly, I don't know anymore. I don't miss my ex or love him anymore, but I feel stuck. Sometimes I think about how I could disappear and it wouldn't make much of a difference. My son forgot my birthday and Mother's Day, and while holidays don't matter much to me, it reinforced this feeling of just existing, being here, but not really being seen. Don't worry, I'm not going to harm myself. My son depends on me, and even when he's grown and on his own, I refuse to leave him like my mom left me. I've thought about getting help, but deep down, I don't think talking to someone will change anything. For now, I just keep going, hoping things will feel better someday. Story 25. When I was around 15 or 16, I'm 28 now, I got into an online game called Gun Z The Duel. The game had an option to purchase in-game items using simple bank details, the account holder's name, bank account number, and the associated bank. Being a brilliant teenager, I thought, how hard could it be to get this info? After some digging, I stumbled upon an online forum for a web shop where people were posting these exact details, calling out sellers they suspected were scammers. I started using this information to buy tons of in-game merchandise. I justified it to myself by thinking, they're scammers, so it's not really wrong. This worked fine for a while, until one of the accounts I used turned out to belong to an innocent person who'd been falsely accused on the forum. That person noticed the unauthorized transactions, reported them to the police, and everything spiraled out of control. Detectives were assigned to the case, and it was treated as serious bank fraud. They eventually traced everything back to me. When they reached out, I panicked and came up with a story. I claimed that I'd been scammed by someone online who gave me the bank details and told me to use them for my transactions in the game. Shockingly, they believed me. The game officials cleared all the merchandise from my account and the case was closed. To this day, no one knows I was the mastermind behind the fraud. It's a secret I've kept all these years, and it'll stay buried here with this confession. Story 26. When I was about 10 or 11, I went to a friend's birthday pool party. There were around 15 other boys there, most of whom knew each other from school, but I didn't. I felt like an outsider. The pool was incredible, uniquely shaped with boulders, a rock water slide, and lots of hidden spots to hang out. One of the boys, Chet, stood out immediately. He was the stereotypical spoiled kid, athletic, rich, good-looking, and incredibly arrogant. Even though it wasn't his party or house, he acted like he was the leader. He hogged all the toys, made sure he was first for everything, and somehow everyone else seemed to adore him. At one point, we were throwing all sorts of balls in the pool, footballs, basketballs, beach balls, and it got chaotic. I noticed that with all the balls flying around, it was dangerous to keep your head up in the water if you were in the middle of the pool. So when Chet was in the middle of the pool, I positioned myself on a step near a boulder. It gave me cover and great leverage. I used every ounce of strength to throw a football at him from about 10 to 15 feet away. I didn't think I'd actually hit him, but I did, right in the side of his face. No one saw me do it or figured out the trajectory of the ball. It was so chaotic that people just shrugged and moved on. Chet, on the other hand, wailed and cried while everyone said, "I don't know who threw it. It could have been anyone." He was fine 30 minutes later and back to being his usual self, but I wasn't intimidated by him anymore. I've seen him a few times near where I grew up. He's still kind of a jerk, but seems happy enough with his life. Meanwhile, my world has grown much larger than his, and I'm very happy with where I am today compared to where he ended up. That moment in the pool? Let's just say it felt like a small, satisfying victory. Story 27. Years ago, I was a heavy drinker. Problematically so. Christmas has always been a big deal in my family, with relatives coming from all over the country to gather at my parents' house. Ironically, addiction and alcoholism are also big issues in my family. On Christmas Eve, I went to a CVS drive-thru to pick up some medication. After dropping off my prescription, I decided to head to my usual bar for a few drinks while it was being filled. Before long, they called to say my meds were ready, so I left the bar and picked them up. But since I had time to kill, I went back to the bar for more drinks. It was Christmas Eve, and everyone was buying rounds of shots. I drank hard, too hard. When I finally decided to leave, I knew I was wasted. At the time, I had a terrible routine of taking an Adderall to sober up when I needed to keep going. I was a bartender back then. So in my drunken haze, I instinctively took a pill and started driving home. On the way, I passed the same CVS I had been to earlier. I was so drunk that I thought I still needed to pick up my meds. I went through the drive-thru again and asked the pharmacist for my prescription. They awkwardly told me to wait a moment and walked away. The next thing I knew, I was being woken up by a bunch of cops. I had passed out in the drive-thru and the employees had called the police. They asked me to park the car and step out. At that moment, the gravity of the situation hit me. I realized I was about to get arrested on Christmas Eve, and my entire family would find out. The shame of disappointing my mom overwhelmed me. There were 11 officers surrounding me while I did the sobriety test. I knew I reeked of alcohol and expected to be arrested. After I finished the test, the officers huddled up and discussed amongst themselves. Finally, the main officer came back and said, "You don't seem too drunk, but I can smell alcohol on you. I'm not going to arrest you, but I can't let you drive." I was so relieved I almost cried. One of the deputies drove me home and scolded me the entire way about how lucky I was. He told me how dangerous my actions were and how easily this could have ended much worse. I've never told anyone this story, but it's one of the worst things I've ever done and gotten away with. It's a painful reminder of who I used to be. This happened over a decade ago, and I've since gotten help. I'm grateful to have turned my life around. Story 28. I come from a large family in a predominantly Islamic country. In this country, not only are Christians segregated, but they are also physically marked, similar to what happened during the Holocaust. My parents decided to convert to Christianity after I was born, and our lives turned into a nightmare. My Islamic relatives shunned my parents immediately. When I was 5, my grandmother arranged for me to be sold to the Brotherhood while my mom was at work. It turns out there were even doctors interested in buying me. That was the breaking point. We had to leave everything behind and flee the country. A relative helped to sponsor our visas, allowing us to escape, but things didn't improve much. Growing up, my parents and I were never invited to family parties, vacations, or gatherings. While my extended family formed bonds and built memories, I stood on the outside, watching from a distance. To make things worse, my dad, a sociopath, became a leader in another religious community. He preached values he didn't live by, making me resent religion even more. I've never shared this with anyone because of the ignorance and judgment surrounding anti-Islamic hate. People don't realize that many girls wearing hijabs don't have a choice. Behind every child forced to cover their hair is a set of parents threatening them with rejection from God if they don't comply. I've grown to hate all religions, especially Islam. Religion doesn't unite people. It creates division, imposes rules that strip away humanity, and fills people with fear under the guise of morality. It promises rewards like 72 virgins and a spot next to God. But in reality, it only enslaves people with false guidelines, robbing them of their power. Story 29. Years ago, I worked as a field tech in IT support. One day I called ahead to my next stop, about 20 minutes away, to let the point of contact know I'd be there soon to upgrade some equipment. She mentioned she had to run to another office but would leave the door unlocked because someone was coming by to pick up a package. When I arrived, the office was empty, just as she said, so I got to work swapping out the old gear for the new. As I was about to pack up and leave, I was suddenly hit with a "I have to sha now" feeling. I ran to the bathroom and did my business. After flushing, I went to wash my hands, but then I heard an ominous sound. The toilet started backing up. Shh, piss. And toilet paper began bubbling over the rim and flooding the floor. The smell was horrendous, and it wasn't just mine. I think the septic tank must have been backing up. Panicked, I had no idea what to do. So I made the terrible decision to put the old equipment back the way I found it and leave. I called the contact and lied, saying I'd been held up at my last appointment and would need to reschedule for the following week. When I returned the next week, the office was undergoing renovations. I casually asked what had happened, and she said the guy who came to pick up the package had apparently clogged the toilet, causing it to overflow. She mentioned that he denied using the bathroom. If you're reading this, package guy, I'm so sorry. Life hadn't prepared me for that moment, and you took the fall for it. Story 30. When I was around 10 to 12 years old, I had Ross River fever for about a month. It caused swelling, pain, and exhaustion. I couldn't go to school and was essentially bedridden. We lived in the Australian outback, so babysitters weren't an option. My parents had to work, but my dad would check on me during lunch breaks. Other than an incident with shooters on the property, everything went fine. I was too weak to even get out of bed, so there wasn't much trouble I could get into. About a year later, we had a creative writing assignment at school, and I decided to write a fictional story inspired by that time. I made up an elaborate tale about how I'd somehow managed to pull my wardrobe over with the door open, trapping myself inside it in the dark, too weak to escape and with no one to help me all day. My mom, unfortunately, was a notorious snoop. She had zero respect for my privacy and went through my things regularly. One time she found a Reader's Digest under my pillow and, without checking, assumed it was an underwear catalog and hit me with it. One day I came home from digging forts or wandering the scrub, and I found her in my room, clutching my creative writing book and crying her eyes out. She thought my fictional story was real and that I'd been trapped in a wardrobe while I was sick. I was furious that she had read my writing but decided to play along. I told her it really happened, even managing to squeeze out a tear for good measure. She was beside herself with guilt and terrified that the teachers would find out I'd been left alone while I was so ill. Nearly 30 years later, she still brings it up occasionally, saying it haunts her to this day. She's still just as nosy and disrespectful of people's privacy, so I've never told her the truth. She'll likely go to her grave believing that story was real. Story 31. When my friend and I were 7 years old, we had a neighbor named Tracy who lived across the street. Tracy was awesome. She was friendly and had 2 big golden retrievers we loved to play with. Whenever we saw her outside with her dogs, we'd usually run over to talk to her and spend time with them. One day, we wanted to visit her and her dogs. We knocked on her front door but got no response. Being the stupid kids we were, we decided to check her sliding patio door. When we found it locked, my friend grabbed a rock and started smashing the lock until it broke. We let ourselves into the house thinking we'd find our dog somewhere inside. The house was eerily quiet, but we didn't think much of it. As we searched, I spotted a bowl of Hershey's Kisses on the kitchen counter and decided to help myself. I ate at least 15 to 20 of them, leaving the wrappers scattered on the counter. Meanwhile, my friend went upstairs and found $5 in Tracy's bedroom. He decided to take it so we could buy ice cream from the truck that came through our neighborhood daily. After exploring for a bit, we heard the ice cream truck outside. We left Tracy's house, bought ice cream, and didn't think twice about what we'd done. A few days later, we saw Tracy parking a U-Haul truck in her driveway. We ran over to say hi and asked her about the truck. She told us that someone had broken into her house, eaten her candy, and stolen money from her bedroom. She said she was moving to live with her mom because her ex-boyfriend, who had been stalking her for 5 years, had likely found her again. Tracy believed he was responsible for the break-in. We acted shocked and said, "What a jerk," not realizing the gravity of what we had done. Later, the police came by to take statements from Tracy and the neighbors. Luckily, they didn't come to my house. 20 years later, I ran into Tracy at an H&M store. We caught up for 2 hours talking about life, music, and movies. At one point, she brought up the break-in from years ago, saying her ex was arrested a couple of months later and charged with theft and breaking and entering. I smiled and said, "Good thing you caught him," while hiding the truth about that day. Story 32. As a kid, my dad was distant and uninvolved. He never took us on holidays, to the movies, or to restaurants, even though we could afford it. He seemed to despise my mom, likely because their marriage was arranged. Very common in India. He focused entirely on work, rarely asked how I was feeling, and never gave me advice. He was like a robot coming home, eating, sleeping, and going back to work the next morning. To be fair, he probably had a lot of work stress, as he was a scientist in one of India's top institutes. Still, his lack of engagement hurt. Fast forward to when I moved to Europe, graduated, and started my career. Our relationship had started to improve, and I began sharing more with him. One day I saw a heartfelt post on Facebook about how to raise kids and sent it to him. I didn't think much of it, but he called me soon after, clearly panicked. For the first time, he opened up to me, crying as he apologized for how he had been as a father. I assured him that I was doing well, and that it didn't matter anymore. 2 days later, my mom called me repeatedly during the night, due to the time difference. When I finally answered, she told me my dad had suffered a heart attack and passed away. I can't shake the feeling that my message made him realize his mistakes and overthink them to the point of triggering the heart attack. I've never told anyone in my family about this. They all believe his death was due to work stress. I still vividly remember his last phone call and how emotional he was. The guilt of possibly contributing to his death weighs on me, even though I know he loved me. Story 33. Years ago, I spent my summers working at a camp deep in the woods. The camp was spread out, with activities and buildings scattered throughout. One weekend, everyone had gone out to enjoy the day off. I decided to have a little me time and went into town for a nice Mexican dinner. A plate of quesadillas smothered in queso sounded perfect. After dinner, I headed back to camp, parking in the staff parking area, which was a dirt road in the woods. From there, it was about a 7 to 8 minute walk to the main camp area. It was around 7:30 p.m., and I figured I had plenty of time to get back and relax before anyone else returned. But then, the rumblings began, the kind that signals something serious. At first, I brushed it off. I've been in situations before where I had to wait a while to find a bathroom, and I've always managed to hold it together. But this time, it was different. As I walked, the urgency hit like a freight train. Beads of sweat started forming on my forehead. My gut felt like it was staging a full rebellion. I picked up my pace and then panic set in. I don't think I'm going to make it. The pool house came into view. Yes, salvation. It was empty and I knew I could slip in unnoticed. I was so close. 25 steps away, then 20 steps, then 15. I clenched harder, praying for strength. 10 steps. The dam burst. I froze mid-stride, desperately trying to stop the flood, but it was too late. My bowels betrayed me in the most epic way. Once the immediate pressure subsided, I regained enough composure to shuffle my way to the pool house. Cheeks clenched, dignity hanging by a thread. Inside, I made it to the toilet just in time for round 2. What followed was a scene straight out of the infamous Amazon reviews for Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. Wave after wave of destruction left me in awe of my own digestive system. The boxers? Beyond saving. They had heroically absorbed the worst of the disaster and had to be retired. I found a plastic grocery bag, wrapped up the evidence, and silently said a few words of gratitude for their sacrifice. Commando and humbled, I made my way back to main camp. I found a trash can tucked away from the main paths and discreetly deposited the bag. By some miracle, no one was around to witness my shame. To this day, I'm grateful for those form-fitting, stretchy boxers. If you ever need a pair of underwear that can keep your secret safe, trust me, invest in good ones. They just might save your dignity, or at least most of it. Story 34. When I was 8 years old, I almost did something horrifying to my 3-year-old brother, though at the time, I didn't realize just how bad it could have been. We were at a playground with one of those multi-level towers with ladders and slides. There had been some construction nearby, and on a previous visit, my friend and I had, for reasons I can't explain, hauled a couple of cinder blocks up into the tower. On this particular day, I was up there alone when I saw my little brother toddling over. I had some tension with him, as siblings often do, but I distinctly remember not feeling malicious. I wasn't thinking about hurting him, much less killing him. I just thought it would be funny to scare him. As he reached the base of the ladder, I pushed one of the cinder blocks over the edge. To this day, I don't know exactly what happened. He wasn't directly under the block when it landed. It only clipped the tip of his big toe. I assume he stepped back or slipped, but instead of a life-altering tragedy, he ended up with a broken toenail. He screamed. My mom came running, and a trip to the ER ended with some nail trimming and a bandage. No lasting harm. Now my family jokes about it as the beginning of my brother's extremely injury-prone childhood. They have no idea how close it could have been. I laugh along, but inside I can't help wondering if that moment says something darker about me. Story 35. When I was in high school, my family went out of town for a weekend and left me home alone, trusting I'd be responsible. And I mostly was a good kid, but I was also a teenager. Naturally, I invited some friends over to drink beer, smoke weed, and smoke shisha. During the night, one of my friends, in a drunken stupor, dropped a coal from the shisha onto the hardwood kitchen floor. It burned a quarter-sized hole. I knew my parents would be furious if they found out. There was no doubt in my mind that there would be serious consequences. For the first week after they returned, I was a nervous wreck, waiting for them to notice. Nothing. By the second week, I realized I needed to cover my tracks. One day, while my mom was making dinner, I casually walked into the kitchen, pointed at the burn mark, and let out a surprised gasp. "Mom, what's this burn mark on the floor? Did you drop something?" She looked at it, thought for a moment, and said, "Oh, I must have dropped something hot while cooking." That was it. The mark never came up again. I was in the clear, and my cover story held strong. Looking back, I'm amazed I pulled it off. But the stress of those first 2 weeks was enough to make me think twice about throwing another party. Story 36. This is one of those wild stories I don't talk about with anyone except the 2 friends who were there with me. A few years back, we went to a new wing restaurant that had just opened, excited to check it out. We were enjoying some beers when suddenly, across the room, this guy threw a glass at a waitress's feet, thankfully missing her, and started shouting. He and his girlfriend looked like they were on something. Meth, most likely. After yelling for a bit, the guy stormed into the bathroom with his girlfriend. While he was in there, my friends and I quietly agreed that if he came out and started trouble, we'd have to step in since most of the other customers were older or women. When he finally came out, it seemed like he was leaving peacefully. The manager had already called the cops, so we figured it was over. But as he was walking out, an older man in his 60s said, "You need some respect." That set the guy off. He turned around and punched the older man in the face. In a split second, I jumped up and tackled the guy into the bar area, knocking over stools and tables in the process. I pinned him down and started dragging him out of the restaurant, but his girlfriend began punching me in the back and neck. While I was trying to block her, the guy got loose and started swinging at me. I'd had enough. I grabbed him by the neck with both hands and slammed him against the window. Then, in a final burst of frustration, I threw him onto an older couple's table, which broke apart, sending beer, nachos, and wings flying everywhere. At that point, his girlfriend screamed, "He's only got one arm, let him go! For F's sake, let him go!" I immediately froze. The guy had been wearing a leather jacket, so I hadn't realized he was missing an arm. Horrified, I let him go, but then he picked up a chair with his one arm and tried to swing it at me. My friend stepped in and knocked him down with one punch, The couple quickly fled before the cops arrived. When the police got there, they took our statements. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges, and I replied, "What would I get, his other arm?" Everyone laughed, including the cop, and we were let go since it was clear I was defending myself and others. The restaurant was trashed, so we ended up going to another place to finish the night. My friends and I don't talk about it much because, well, we beat up a one-armed man. Even if he deserved it, it's not a story people tend to react well to. Story 37. When I was 15, my family hosted our annual 4th of July party, a tradition I always looked forward to. It was a mix of family, friends, and coworkers. My dad's best friend Jim was a regular at these parties, and that year, he brought some family members who were staying with him for the summer. 2 nephews and a niece named Emily. The moment I saw Emily, I was stunned. She was my age, and to me, absolutely perfect. Looking back, she was probably just a bit above average in terms of looks, but in my eyes, she was everything. I couldn't stop thinking about her, but was too shy to even say hello. I figured I had time. She was staying with Jim, and I could work up the courage eventually. A week later, I overheard my dad and Jim talking and learned that Emily and her brothers were only visiting from out of state, on the other side of the country. My heart sank. I felt like I had blown my chance, and the thought of never seeing her again hit me hard. For months, I was down on myself for not having the confidence to talk to her. By January, I decided I needed to change. I realized my self-consciousness about my appearance was holding me back, so I started lifting weights. My cousin, who was into fitness, helped me out, and by the time summer rolled around, I had transformed. I went from 135 pounds to just over 180, and people started noticing. As July approached, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves. I thought, what if Emily comes back? I was ready this time, but she didn't. That year, I came to terms with the fact that I'd probably never see her again. I felt like all my effort had been for nothing. To this day, I've never told anyone about Emily or how she inspired me to start lifting. I also haven't felt that way about anyone else since. She'll always be the person who unknowingly pushed me to grow, even if we never had a single conversation. Story 38. I had a cat who was peeing all over the house. She never used her litter box, and I couldn't figure out why. Over the course of months, I took her to the vet at least 5 times to check her health, her bladder, and for urinary crystals. We tried 2 different anti-anxiety medications and even an antidepressant. Out of desperation, I hired a cat behaviorist, but she turned out to be completely unhelpful. Either a scammer or delusional. She claimed that the lack of crystals and calming energy in the house was the issue, and recommended getting rid of certain paintings and home decor in colors cats couldn't see, arguing that it made the cat feel alienated. I kicked her out of my house after 1 hour, though I still paid her. Despite all my efforts, the problem persisted. My other cat began peeing in the same spots as her, and my house started to reek of cat urine. The floors were ruined, the urine seeped into the baseboards and plaster of the old house, and the smell was unbearable, especially during humid summers. I felt like I was living in a litter box. The breaking point came when my 1-year-old daughter crawled through a puddle of pee we hadn't spotted yet. That was it. I had been trying to rehome the cat for months, thinking maybe the other cat was bullying her when she tried to use the litter box. But after countless failed attempts, I gave up. I drove her to a city shelter. They made it clear she would be put down that same afternoon if I left her there. I left in tears, devastated by what I was doing. She was a sweet, loving, and cuddly cat who adored me. I knew she wasn't peeing out of spite. Something was wrong, and I couldn't fix it. She trusted me, and I betrayed her. 2 days later, I received a response to one of my old ads. A kind woman offered to take her in and give her a fresh start. It was 2 days too late. If I just held out a little longer, my cat might have lived and found a home where she could be happy. To this day, I can't forgive myself for what I did, and I'll never tell my wife or kids about it. They don't know I had a potential solution within reach. My cat deserved better than what I gave her, and it haunts me still.